the adaptability of our crops is so critical vis-a-vis pathogens, extremes of weather, and the fact that we use less water and many fewer nutrients than most farms. We use 1/5 the amount of fertilizer, nitrogen fertilizer and phosphorus fertilizer that we are recommended to use by our nutrient management plan advisors. 1/5. So our plants have to be very thrifty. And we're not talking a small garden. We used to do about 10,000 tomato plants annually. Because of flooded markets and the difficulties of taking care of workers when it gets really, really hot, we've downsized our summer. We probably only do 2,500 tomato plants every year.
Welcome to episode 81 of the Seed Farmer Podcast, the podcast where I want you to harvest seeds from some of the vegetables and flowers growing in your farm or garden, and then to plant that seed out to grow delicious vegetables and beautiful flowers. If you enjoy the Seed Farmer Podcast and find it to be a good resource that helps you improve your seed work and farming, please support the show at spreadsheet.farm/supportpodcast. I'm your host, Dan Brisebois, seed grower at Turnasol Cooperative Farm and author of The Seed Farmer, a complete guide to growing, using, and selling your own seeds. Brett Grohsgal is this episode's guest. Brett runs Even Star Organic Farm in Lexington, Maryland, alongside his wife, Dr. Christine Bergmark. They grow vegetables for CSA and farmers markets, but they also keep a number of their own seed lines that are foundations for the success of their farm. In this episode, Brett and I talk about how to breed adaptive crops for your region and for extreme weather resilience. Brett has also eliminated most overhead irrigation and significantly reduced the amount of fertilizer that he applies on his fields, which adds even more selection pressure to his crops. We get into his work with brassicas, especially his Icebred and Coyote Arugula. We also talk about when you should keep your own seeds and when you might rely on purchased seeds. In the deep dive, Brett and I discuss cherry tomatoes for seed, how he made his initial crosses, how he's been selecting them for years for exceptional flavor and disease resistance, and what cherry tomato seed harvest looks like. Enjoy the conversation. Welcome, Brett, to the Seed Farmer Podcast.
Thank you so much, Dan. It's a joy to be here.
When I first started farming and getting interested in seeds, I came upon a few articles of yours in Growing for Market that just blew me away. I loved them, and they really illustrated the power that you can have of selecting varieties. And I ultimately did go and visit you like 15 years ago, and it's always been something that's inspired me. So I'm excited to actually have this conversation on the podcast to get deeper into all these topics.
Well, I love being here and I love talking about genetics. If you can get crop genetics, if you can get 10% of farmers to start managing their own gene lines, their own adapted varieties, that's a major accomplishment.
10% would be something. That would change farming.
Yeah, that would change farming. Let's start out with any other questions you have, and I'm very flattered that you enjoyed your visit. If you visit again, though, they'll have to be later in the day with more bourbon.
We'll try to schedule it that way.
Yeah.
So why don't we start with your seed story and how you realize the importance of seeds on a farm, or just period?
I'll go quickly. I was in grad school, and the work I had started for my doctoral dissertation was selecting rice and cowpea varieties for extremely aluminum toxic soils in the Amazon. My boss at the time, who is truly a boss, who gets all the funding and tells grad students what to do, this is in a soil science department, eventually won both the World Food Prize and the MacArthur. So he was high powered. And I realized then that specific adaptations of specific crops to specific regions, all those three things were critical for farmer success. I was also lucky enough to have a great professor teaching me crop breeding at that same school at North Carolina State University. So while I dropped out of the doctoral program to become married and become a farmer, it was great work and fascinating work. Once I started to realize that I could become a farmer, if I saved enough money, I could buy land. Then I started to breed. I'd been gardening for a long time, intensive gardening, and I had made money from it in both California and Virginia and North Carolina. I was selling on a very small scale. But once I realized that a bigger farm was feasible, I started really intensifying the crop breeding that one could do in a home garden environment. So what came out of that were 2 critical cherry tomato lines and 2 critical brassicaceae winter hardy lines. And I won't even talk about the failures. I'll mention one that I was still regretful about. I was unable to get a truly winter hardy cauliflower. And I mean truly winter hardy, like can make it through the ice storms, can make it through the snowstorms, and eventually flower with no morbidity in the spring and get you seeds. But that was a long time ago.
So it sounds like your relationship with seeds goes far back then.
Yes. In fact, the very first seeds I planted, I was also very lucky to have 3 maternal females, my mom, my aunt, and my grandma, who were plant whisperers. So I was taught how to prune roses and how to plant cosmos when I was 6. So my very first seed that I planted, it was a citrus seed. It wasn't going to germinate. And I asked my mom, could I plant them? And she, of course, is an empowering woman, said, yeah, they probably won't grow, but let's see what happens. And they failed. Only one sprouted, and it was more, wasn't very strong. But it started at age 6, and then I was the unpaid worker for those 3 women with gardening since I was 6 or 7. So genetics really matters, but living in different places. I've lived in California. I've worked and gone to school in California, New Jersey, Virginia, North Carolina. I traveled at sea, seeing, as a worker. I've lived a lot of places, and it matters. Different conditions mandate different crops.
Now, I want to get into talking about your farm and how you do this work, but you haven't mentioned that you've also had a career as a chef. Am I right in that?
Yes, I was unfortunate enough to be the chef in 9 establishments and the line cook in 6. So that let me save money for the farm. But I'll be honest, the Iron Chef shows and the big, the shows that show the inside of the restaurant trade, I want nothing to do with them. If people are watching those, I'll walk out of the room because I still get restaurant nightmares every 5 days. And it's always the same one. The front of the house is booked full seating. They've overbooked. And none of my workers come in but one disher. So it's me and a disher. That happens every 5 days. I got the scars. I don't want to talk about being a chef.
So we won't lean into that part and its relationship to seed.
I appreciate that.
Why don't you tell us about your farm?
Yeah, we're in Southern Maryland. So we're in USDA Zone 7B. We're also in the hurricane region. So we pay higher insurance because we're considered hurricane prone. We're actually much warmer than much of the US. The coldest temps we, on average, get in the winter are 10 degrees Fahrenheit. That's pretty balmy. That's pretty decent temperature. It's not like Canada. It's not like Vermont, not like Minnesota. The hottest temperature we get in the summer, 101, 102, 98, something like that. Very, very humid. The problem we also have is that the weather extremes have become much more pronounced. So one winter day, it'll be 60 degrees outside. Everyone's happy. We're all harvesting and, not just bundled up. The next day it'll drop to 20 degrees. And then an Alberta clipper, which is what the really cold winds out of the Northwest are called in our region. Alberta clipper will come in with 10% humidity and 10 degrees Fahrenheit and no snow. And that's brutal on crops. So getting to our crops, we grow 12 months of the year, we harvest 12 months of the year, and we plant in all months except late November through mid-January. So we're sowing seeds every 10 months of the year effectively. November 15th through January 15th, we don't plant seeds. But we're harvesting year round. I make more money in the winter. I make much more money I net more money in the winter. We gross more money in the summer, but we net more money in the winter. Because in the winter, it's a seller's market. Anything you grow will be purchased. I could paint cardboard green and someone would buy it as a salad mix. And I don't do that.
You can't repeat that one too much.
Well, some supermarkets are already trying it. So I'll leave it to the purveyors of low quality produce to take that approach. So we grow what can be grown in a certified organic fashion in the winter really well. Leafy greens, both salad and for cooking. turnips, radishes, fresh herbs. We do have 3 large greenhouses. We no longer heat them because I'm concerned about carbon footprint. So heating is no longer done. It's ambient. And obviously greenhouses get hot just with sun anyway. But the crops in the greenhouses have to learn how to survive freezes, because they do freeze. Emphatically, they freeze. Open field, I'm more happy with. My workers like the greenhouses. I like open field, even when it's cold. In the summer and the spring and the fall, we're what every other certified organic farm in our region does. Tomatoes, cucumbers, melons, blackberries. We're very good at figs because we're just far enough south, and I know figs very well to be able to grow them out of their range. We're considered not economically feasible for figs where we are. We're too cold in the winter. Last year, we broke our record of 200. We had 260 cases of figs harvested. That's a lot of figs. So we grow a lot of stuff. We fail at, it's easier to talk about what we fail at, the stone fruits, tree fruits. Apples, we fail at apples. We fail at sweet cherries. We fail at pears. We fail at sweet corn. We fail at peaches. We fail at plums. That's about what we fail at.
And how do you market all these crops?
We were dominantly wholesale until I came to my senses through one of my 4 women and my wife saying I should go into the CSA. And we've been a very highly rated CSA since 2000, and I've decreased our wholesale commitments. We've been doing farmers markets since 1998. And the CSA exploded as we pivoted during COVID. COVID was very good to our farm and to other farmers that could pivot, because all of a sudden demand was very, very high. At the same time, our wholesale accounts took 9 months to pay me because they were floundering, our restaurants. So at the time I was selling to 9 restaurants, and right as COVID started, and they were in deep trouble, and many of them went down. So we pivoted into full-blown CSA, remote pickups, remote everything, and we really flourished. But much of that is testimony to my wife, and to a certain extent, our daughter, Allie Bergmark, because they were able to do the pivot. I was just growing the crops with my crew.
It's fantastic to have folks who have the mental bandwidth to do that. Because when that pivot had to happen, it wasn't like we had a lot of runway. It was, crops were in the ground already.
No, but actually I had a lot of runway because my master's work in soil science was soil microbiology. I've run the USDA quarantine lab just as a grunt worker. I was still in charge of the greenhouses in a quarantine lab in Albany, California. I've been taught by great microbiologists. So this virus, we've been through this before. We've been through bad viruses before. In fact, my kid brother died of AIDS. So I have deep familiarity with pathogens, and therefore creating a safe workplace wasn't hard. We're good at safety. And if you just follow microbiological principles and you believe in vaccines as a really useful tool, you can probably have a pretty safe workplace.
You're predominantly a market grower or like a vegetable grower as opposed to a seed grower, though seed growing is important. How much of the seed that you're growing is from your farm, and how much is seed that you're buying in?
That's a great question. Those numbers are easy to crank out, even though I'm tired right now. Our cover crop seed that's actually intentionally sown is 100% from off farm. So our crimson clover, I don't have a combine, so I can't do crimson. I can't harvest the seed from our crimson clover, our vetch, or our sorghum sudan grass. Those are our dominant cover crops. So 100% of that comes from off farm. Our Roma tomatoes seed come from off farm. 14 other tomato varieties are bred from our gene lines. So one Roma, all the rest is our gene lines. All of our watermelons are now from our farm. All our seeds, rather. What else? Squash I buy, summer squash, and it's an inevitable failure. Cucumbers I buy currently, the seed. Our peppers I buy, most of them, not all of them. And then winter crops, 90% are bred from our gene lines because winter is tough. And if you can succeed at winter, you have a ready marketplace. Purchased seed just doesn't do as well. It doesn't. We're also facing more disease pressures, especially in the greenhouses. So I've gone to almost 100% seed that we've saved for our greenhouses. especially lettuces and brassicaceae.
So when you're buying something in, is it that you can't produce the seed effectively yourself? Or is it that the seed on the market is good enough that you don't feel you need to improve it?
Dan, those are great questions. I do not need to improve purple top turnip. Purple top turnip is already about the best adapted and the most marketable turnip that's out there. And most people don't even know it's an heirloom. It dates back to, I think, the 1880s.
I think so.
Yeah. So we don't save seed of purple top turnip or white egg turnip or gold ball turnip. We buy those from Fedco or from one or two other companies, or from High Mowing, who I also really value. We don't save seed of daikon because even though it might flower, the plants are morbid when they flower. If they make it through winter, they're morbid. But arugula, I cannot imagine buying an arugula that is as good as ours. I just can't. It is a durable. It is a beast of a plant. It's invasive. It's so good. There was a crisis early COVID on eggplant. Eggplant seed was widely unavailable, or it wasn't sold true to type. We don't buy eggplant seed anymore because once burned, twice shy. I want to know the eggplant I grow is going to be vigorous and delicious and tender and mild. So sometimes we save seed because the seed is we can do better, and sometimes I purchase seed because, quite frankly, the seed out there is fine. It's fine. It'll do its job.
So then what is the role of breeding adaptive crops for your farm in your region?
Many times purchased gene lines or varieties, let's call them, fail. They fail because we don't believe in babying our crops. As an example, once I found 2 threatened vertebrate species in our irrigation pond, I stopped using it because the irrigation pumps were so powerful. They would scoop up these poor little one species of snake and the American eel, elvers. They would scoop them up and they would put those chopped up bits of animal through my irrigation heads. So I stopped using the irrigation, the big irrigation systems. And now we're dominantly a well for initial establishment, and then we're rain fed. And that means that we face some substantial drought issues. But I'm doing that to be a better steward and because it works. So I have to breed tolerance of drought into all of our crops, not severe crops. That's winter and summer crops, not the greenhouse ones, because we use ample water in the greenhouses. But the adaptability of our crops is so critical vis-a-vis pathogens, extremes of weather, and the fact that we use less water and many fewer nutrients than most farms. We use 1/5 the amount of fertilizer, nitrogen fertilizer and phosphorus fertilizer that we are recommended to use by our nutrient management plan advisors. 1/5. So our plants have to be very thrifty. And we're not talking a small garden. We used to do about 10,000 tomato plants annually. Because of flooded markets and the difficulties of taking care of workers when it gets really, really hot, we've downsized our summer. We probably only do 2,500 tomato plants every year. Nonetheless, in my packing room right now, there is a surplus of 55 cases of cherry tomatoes and approximately 800 pounds of heirloom tomatoes. And I'm going to hustle my butt off trying to sell those.
And those are all from your own lines?
That is correct. That is correct.
There's definitely, there's some crops that I do see people adopting quickly OP seed, but tomatoes is one that there's been a lot of fear for and like really a move towards hybrids. And you've leaned into your own lines.
Wow. And I'm a firm believer in hybrids having some application, but I really am a firm believer in the recurrent mass selection, which is selection over large populations over many years, as written in that original article in Growing for Market, gives me adapted land races. That is really a powerful tool. Hybrids are fine. We have hybrid sweet peppers, some of our sweet peppers, and hybrid summer squash. That's it for hybrids. Hybrids really, in general, hybrids require more fertility, more water, sometimes more spraying with organic or non-organic pesticides. And they're prima donnas. And I don't want prima donnas. I want adapted land races. And a land race is a ideally large population of individuals that all are pretty much of the same gene line. They can all breed within each other, but they're not uniform. They're not homogeneous. They're heterogeneous. And what they're really adapted, their homogeneity is only that they are adapted to that particular area, that particular region. That's why they're called land races. But they're all adapted. So some of my arugula after the first November frost will turn purple, which is normal for arugula. Some will wait till the third frost to turn purple. They'll be just green until the third frost. That's what landrace gives you. So hybrids, oh my God, yeah, they're uniform. They're uniform in your harvestability. They're uniform, hopefully, in germination, though I've had some problems with purchased seed that were not uniform. And incidentally, purchased seed is claimed to be without any off types. That is nonsense. Try buying 5 different ounces of 5 different plum tomatoes gene lines, and you'll find a lot of cherry tomatoes in there, and they won't taste very good. So the whole idea that hybrids are going to be wholly uniform and better than what a farmer can produce is a marketing tool. It's not a truth. So recurrent mass selection also bypasses the GMO question. As a certified organic grower, I cannot use GMOs. I have no inherent problem with GMOs for other farmers, but I think that I'm absolutely convinced that the claims that GMO crops will save us in an era of climate change is a wrong claim. It's actually deceitful marketing. GMOs will not save us. They will play a role, but adaptation to climate change and to all the problems that we're now facing are multi-genes, multi-loci, and probably multi-chromosomes. And that's because they're multigenic. In other words, it takes a lot of different genes interacting properly to get you an adapted crop. Because of that, genetically modified organisms are going to have a real tough time because they're usually single gene or at least a couple genes on the same part of the same chromosome. So I could be mistaken, but that's my belief as a geneticist. Adapted land races don't give you that nonsense. Every single year, only the survivors get to breed. Only the survivors get to have sex and make seeds, especially with the winter crops, but including the summer crops. So adapted land races, they've been subjected to these rigors for so long. They know about the rigors better than I do.
Do you want to tell us about some of the selection work you've done, like in brassicas?
I'd love to. Let's start with the brassicas. Let's start with arugula. My mom had grown and saved seed of arugula. She's Italian. She'd grown and saved seed of arugula, which back then was called rocket. And she saved her own seed, and it was delicious. I mean, very delicious. It wasn't particularly winter hardy, but using that seed, I got some pretty winter hardy stuff. But I started to notice what I perceived as inbreeding depression. So I got a really good gene line out of Turkey, the country, and I crossed them. And it was very hard to cross them because they flowered at a different time. So I had to get rid of all the flowers of the Turkish line, which flowered earlier than my mother's, after a winter. This is after a winter. They have to live through a winter. They flower in April, typically. I had to cut off all the flowers of the Turkish plants so that so I could synchronize flowering and therefore pollination. That was the start of our Icebred Arugula, currently sold by Fedco. That cross occurred in 1992. So I started with 2 adapted gene lines, one of which I suspect had inbreeding depression. I managed to get pollination to occur by timing flowering with some, because arugula will reflower. And since 1992, I've been breeding that same gene line, that same landrace for tolerance to winter and tolerance to drought during planting season, which for us is September. So it's had to make it through every single winter to survive. And it's called Icebred Arugula because one of the founders of Fedco, C.R. Lawn, and I talked about how most brassicas, when they flower prematurely, you get a thaw and they flower, and then a really bad weather comes in. Not only does the flowers die, but the plants will often die. Bad weather meaning 10 degrees. Icebred, the flowers don't even die at 10 degrees Fahrenheit. That is hardcore stuff, buddy. So, and I'm sorry, Dan, you probably have a question?
For the listeners, just to kind of put it like just to make sure it's clear, like, so you're planting in September. And when I visited your farm, one thing I was surprised was how far apart your rows were during the winter. Are those kind of like a couple feet apart in the open field?
Open field, we're now doing broadcasting. We've changed our system somewhat. We're bulking our seed with chicken feed, the parts of this feed that the chickens don't like. And instead of a worker with a push seeder, me or a very trained forewoman or other highly skilled worker is broadcasting, typically with crimson clover seed intermixed. So it takes very skillful broadcasting. And then those are cultipacked in, those are pushed down to ground, pushed down so they have soil contact. And so we have much more massive plantings. And it's faster to execute because we're not doing push seeder and we're not doing machine seeder. Because our farm believes in rough tillage, the mechanical seeders don't work very well. And rough tillage is a soil management issue or approach that we probably don't have time to get into today. But for me, rough tillage was something I was taught in grad school, and I'm a believer in it because it gives me drainage when there's too much rain and yields when all the other farmers are flooded out.
Wow, so you're broadcasting the arugula seed mixed in with other seed. So it's giving you a little bit of a pasture, and then you have your crew go out through the winter harvesting these for your accounts.
Not destructive harvesting, but typically cut and come again or selective leaf harvesting. Not typically destructive is what we do only for turnips, radishes in the winter. We only do destructive harvesting for turnips, radishes.
Well, because if you do destructive harvesting, you won't have the growing point, and therefore you won't get the seeds later.
And not only that, what will the worker do? They will choose to destructively harvest the biggest, best plants. That destroys your gene lines. Now, if you destructively harvest, which we do, the runts, hell yeah, get rid of the runts, man.
So those are the smaller plants, that not as much oomph as the big ones. And so you're happy to get rid of them to kind of just improve the genetics.
Correct. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm quite aware of the difference between phenotype and genotype. So phenotype is what a plant looks like. Genotype is what it actually has in its chromosomes. That plant that looks runty could just have gotten much less nitrogen when it germinated. It could be unlucky, but recurrent mass selection over generation after generation after generation, you're going to improve your gene lines about 60% every year. Even though maternal selection, the plants you choose to save seed from in the spring, in case of the overwintered crops, maternal selection is not nearly as precise as me manually crossing the pollen from a great male to a great female. But it really works over the long haul.
So then there's some selection by frost over the winter?
Oh no. Ideally, there's substantial selection, and ideally you see death. Not death, not the 100% death. If I'm starting with a new gene line and I want to test it for winter, and I eventually want to breed it for winter hardiness, I enjoy seeing 90% mortality because the 10% that survive are going to be really strong. Those 10% that survive. So a different example. Our Icebred arugula was winter hardy pretty much from the get-go. A much better example to answer your question was our Chinese thick stem mustard. A damn good mustard. Sweet, just enough punch and pungency to be exciting. Juicy, crunchy, heavy. It's a great mustard. Goes very well in salad mix. And it's not as aggressive as, say, Osaka purple mustard or even agano. It's not as aggressively flavored. So it's a great mustard flavor-wise. We tried, the first year I tried to make it winter hardy, 100% mortality. They all died. Second gene line from a different supplier, 100% mortality. They all died. The third gene line, 5% were still alive at the end of winter. That was critical because now I got the strong base for that land race. Those 5% were babied after that. We didn't harvest them. We would let them make seeds without turning them into salad mix or pure mustard for the marketplace. That's all we did to baby them. We didn't give them any added fertilizer, no added irrigation, just don't molest them anymore for their leaves. That third provenance, that third supply with their 5% survival was really good. Now realize we're planting 50,000 to 100,000 individual Chinese thick stem mustard plants every year. So 5% still adds up to a good number of individuals. So that's why it's a land race. It's a recurrent, It's recurrent mass selection means you're selecting from a lot of individuals. Of those 5% that survived, only the top 40% of stems were chosen for seed. So once they started making flower stalks, the worker supervised by me or very trained, the worker is choosing the thickest flower stalks at ground level, the top 40%. So I'll go out there and I'll say, looks like about the top 40% is the thickness of your pinky finger, Julia, or the thickness of your pinky finger, Abby. And you're going to harvest those seed stalks once the seeds are ripe enough. You're going to ignore all the small seed stalks. So you're doing maternal selection at that point. And I'm quite aware that arugula has both stamens and pistils. It's monoecious, but the seeds are coming from the female parts. Did I answer the question?
I think you've answered the question, yeah. And I'm going to ask another question, which is, so in the case of this, of the mustard, you said you got 5% survival from the third line you tried. That second year that you regrew that, how much better did it do?
70% survival. And then we had one winter that was close to the Canadian winters. And that we've been growing Chinese 6M since 1994 and on our farm since 1997. We had one winter that was close to you guys. I'm sorry, to the northern tier growers. Coldest temperature was -5 Fahrenheit. It killed a lot of our crops. That year, I still had 60% survival of Chinese thick stem. This last winter was brutal. We had ice, snow, cold, ice, snow, cold, ice, snow, cold. And ice is really hard on outdoor plants. And we had 100% survival.
Wow.
And ditto for the Icebred arugula and ditto for two other gene lines. Our Siberian kale, we had 60% survival because that was not a seed I'd been saving. Because Siberian kale's, the red Russian kale, pretty durable. It can take winter. Well, because we had 40% mortality, we saved seed from the 60% of survivors. So now we're independent of seed companies for Siberian kale. And we have a better gene line just by noticing that 40% died from this horrible winter. I'm like, no, we're not gonna mow that down. We're gonna save seed from the best individuals. And now I will send you a photograph of it must be 4 pounds of Siberian kale seed that we saved. Really easy. Well, so that may explain things better. Mortality is not bad when you're trying to create a landrace. In fact, you need mortality to weed out the weaklings.
That's the selection pressure. You're witnessing it.
Yes, and you're living it. And if you grow enough acres, we grow 25 acres every winter plus 3 greenhouses. We don't need every plant to survive. We got 25 acres. That's a fair amount of acreage out there of leafy greens and turnips and radishes.
Is most of your selection work really for survivability and hardiness as opposed to like taste or aesthetics?
Oh, no. I'm sorry. We've already gotten to the taste levels. We don't grow boring stuff. If you want boring stuff, go to the supermarket. So our arugula is not a wimp. It's not Astro. And I hate to put down whoever bred Astro, but it's a piece of junk arugula. It doesn't have any punch. Our arugula has real flavor. Our Chinese 6M mustard has real flavor, really nice stuff. Our tomatoes, the stuff we grow in the summer, the first and most important test is, do you have really good flavor balance? So we grow, some of our gene lines, proprietary, that we grow for tomatoes, some are low acidity, some are moderate acidity. Those have to have buttery flavors, really nice, deep umami flavors to overcome the fact they don't have the acidity that most people want, and I want in a tomato. So even our low acidity and moderate acidity tomatoes that we grow have to have a substantial flavor background or foreground. Our cherry tomatoes that we grow, almost all of them really are aggressively flavored. We unfortunately do grow 2 gene lines of cherry tomatoes for the market. One is called Pale Rose. It is just sugar. There's no acidity whatsoever. It's pale pink. And I grow it only because little kids and people who only say, I want a sweet tomato, really buy it. I detest it. I will not bring it in the house, but I have to grow that gene line for the market. The tomatoes I like to grow are the ones that wallop you in the face with acidity and sweetness and flavors. and we save those gene lines.
So we're going to get back into tomatoes when we get into the deep dive. What kind of seed cleaning tools or facilities do you have?
We do have a seed cleaner, about a $5,000 seed cleaner, and we parked at that. That's been not used for a long time because we were using it when we were selling bulk seed to Fedco and to a couple other seed companies. We are actually harvesting the seed ourselves by hand, threshing it by hand, using a wood chipper to break up the siliques. That's the name of the seed pods. Winnowing it with heavy fans, all the old-fashioned techniques that really work. Some of it was manual, most of it was involved machines. And that's the winter brassicas, and the lettuces as well, but those are really done. The lettuces we're now saving for disease tolerance. Those are really more by hand than anything. The tomato seed is all manual. The watermelon seed is all manual. The jars and dilute bleach to sterilize and fermentation processes. And these are all documented in books and podcasts like yours, and in books like the ones by Brian Connolly and others. Cooperative Extension is great at how to manage seed on a small scale in farm environments. I've got 5 or 10 jars of tomato seed fermenting right now. They were harvested 5 days ago. I put them into the juice and the seeds into individual well-labeled jars yesterday, and they'll be cleaned up probably Monday morning. They'll be sanitized with bleach and then let dry.
You mentioned that you used to sell seed to Fedco and other companies. So you don't sell seed now, it sounds like.
I get royalty payments from Fedco for 2 gene lines, and the new seed buyer at Fedco trialed 2 of our newer gene lines, winter gene lines, 2 years ago, and they survived magnificently in Maine, overwintered. So that is an exciting thing, and I'm preparing the seed for her now. We will sell to Fedco presumably, some bulk of a mustard called New Star mustard. It is frilly, green, not red, not purple, aggressively flavored, a real mustard, not as gentle as Chinese thick stem mustard, which is my favorite, which they already sell. But it's got insanely good vigor and winter survivability and tolerance of Xanthomonas campestris, a pretty bad disease. And finding something that's tolerant of Xanthomonas campestris is a major accomplishment. I didn't say resistant, I said tolerant. So that's going to help growers who have that problem. And there's a lot of growers out there who have that problem. The other gene line is a new arugula gene line. It's called Coyote. And it is even more assertive and survival focused as its parent, our Icebred arugula.
Is that a selection from the Icebred that has been further refined?
Yes, that is. So it has the same flavors, but it's even more. Oh boy! I first isolated it 5-6 years ago. It had been in a field of thistle that I had fallowed, and the thistle had taken over. And thistle, as you probably know, grows to about 2-3 foot tall. And the Icebred, I'm sorry, not the Icebred. The Icebred had been in there 4 or 5 years before, and this had survived in the thistle, mowing periodically. I would mow the thistle down. That Coyote had survived. More importantly, it did not appear to have the same level of susceptibility to bacterial speck as many other arugulas, especially commercial arugulas, show. So bacterial speck is another disease. So Coyote has been this volunteer on our farm for a while, and it is markedly more, it's even more durable than Icebred. And I don't know how you get that. I don't know how it attained that level of winter hardiness and weed tolerance and just survivability, much less vigor. Because, you're looking at 1 foot tall, big bushy plants when the thaws happen in April from that gene line. I mean, that's been a stalwart. Our customers have been eating Coyote arugula for quite some time now. They just don't know it. And I called it Coyote because we unfortunately have coyotes in our region. And boy, you just can't get rid of them. They are going to be here till the day I die and afterwards.
I saw in a presentation that or a presentation you shared with me that you also talk about selecting the coyotes out of your populations.
Yes. So we found that they self-isolated in 2 really rough fallowed fields. And then the selection that was critical for coyote was, again, you have to make it through winter. You have to show minimal signs of bacterial speck. You have to be vigorous in the winter after you've been selectively harvested and not destructively harvested. And then we select the best mother plants of that smaller planting. Our normal arugula plantings of our regular Icebred arugula, which has been a stalwart. It's been an amazing producer for us. Our normal winter plantings are about 4 acres, plus the greenhouses. Our coyote has never been on more than an acre because it's a tougher gene line, and I just let it alone. So it is definitely a daughter, as it were, of Icebred, but it's a daughter that's even more vigorous than its parental lines.
Why not replace the Icebred with the coyote?
I eventually will.
It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, it's just a matter of time. Coyote right now has more values to other farmers. We have enough seed, though. Honestly, we have enough seed. We have over 120 pounds of our brassica seed in our walk-in. Some of it's too old. Some of it I should turn into mustard that you'd spread on a good sausage. But we have tons of seed. We over-harvest seed. So eventually coyote does replace. Now, one thing I have not subjected coyote to are the disease pressures of greenhouses, specifically crown rot. So since we don't manage temperatures on our greenhouses, we let the greenhouses be as they are. In fact, they're actually technically hoop houses. There's more diseases. There are more diseases in cold, wet winters. Overcast, wet, cool winters are bad for greenhouse disease tolerance. So our Icebred arugula has a greenhouse subline that is adapted, and only the survivors of crown rot and other diseases get to have sex in the spring and flower with bumblebees present to help them pollinate. Coyote's not been subjected to that.
Your farm is a laboratory that's just continuously creating new things for you.
Every year.
Now, just to go back to the question about selling seed, is there a reason that seed is not a larger financial part of your farm?
Seed is an incredibly large financial part of our farm. We would not have the production we have if we were buying seed that was of lower quality. So it's a backbone of our farm. I don't sell my soils either. But if to put it in an analog form or an analytic, you know what I mean? Yes, allegorical or simile farm. If I were selling my soils, the soils and the seeds and the gene lines are what make the farm so good, and they would make our production so guaranteed. That's the critical part. It's all about guaranteed production when weather is adverse. When weather is adverse, the marketplace, the broader marketplace, is much more receptive to you and your crops and the price you need to charge to be able to pay your workers. When the weather's good, the market floods. I don't care about performance when the weather's good. I care about performance when the weather's bad.
Yeah.
Pretty intense conversation.
It's important conversations. And I think that it's a conversation that isn't present at enough small farming venues. So they're important questions. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of great seed companies out there, and many coming from a really good place. But there's such a role on small farms, and I think it's really impressive how fundamental it is to your farm, and how your farm couldn't be the farm it is without these lines.
Correct.
There's a lot of farmers who've only been farming for a few years nowadays. Like, they have enough challenges, but if they're going to be farming for 20, 30, 40 years, I think keeping some seed really makes a difference on your farm's resilience. If you're already a seed farmer, or even just thinking about harvesting seed from your plants for the first time, head over to seedgrowers.farm for my free seed grower resources. There is cross-pollination information, seed yield information, even a few seed spreadsheets. There's also a list of my favorite seed books and podcasts. While you're there, you can also sign up for my weekly newsletter to get seed grower tips and stories straight into your inbox. So head to seedgrowers.farm for my seed grower resources. Now, back to the show.
We could address how to empower young farmers or beginning farmers to start saving seed and start running the genetics. We could address that right now and then go to the more detailed stuff later, if that would be good.
I usually wrap up with a question on that. Well, let's just jump into it because it's on top of mind.
Yeah, so start out with one crop. Start out with your favorite crop, and don't start with hybrids. I have enough genetics education and enough genetics background that I was able to do what's called dehybridization. That's a lot of work. And you got to be in it for the long haul. Don't do that. Do an open pollinated variety that's not a hybrid. And do your favorite one, the one you care about the most. Let's say it's ping tung long eggplant. Really easy, because eggplant are easy. Let's say it's ping tung long eggplant, which is originally a Taiwanese eggplant. Maybe many people mistakenly call it Japanese or Chinese. It's actually originally from Taiwan. The open pollinated gene lines of ping tung long tend to be better performers in bad adverse conditions than the newer, more proprietary lines. So the open pollinated ping tung is a great place to start. Plant at least 50, 60, 100 plants in a field quite isolated from the rest of your eggplant. By quite isolated, I'd say, oh boy, minimum 100 foot, because bees will fly and bumblebees will certainly fly. And you would select the fruit from the most prolific, most vigorous of those plants and just let it ripen on the vine. We tie ribbons to our eggplant plants that are going to be mother plants and again, I'm aware that they have both male parts and female parts, but I'm calling them mother plants because they give us seeds. We'll tie ribbons to those, and the workers are instructed to leave the fruit on those selected, most vigorous mother plants and don't harvest them. And then those fruits will eventually turn yellow, which is what ripe and overripe eggplant do. You don't want to eat the yellow fruits because they're tough of skin and no longer tender and mild, but their seeds are ripening. When the fruits are truly yellow, then you cut them off, slit them open, and do the fermentation process with water, just plain old water, that you do with tomato seed. It takes about 3 to 5 days, and then you can start your drying. So I can imagine no crop easier for saving seed without you doing any pollination work than no summer crop than eggplant. I think that was good. Do you have another crop you'd like to tackle?
I know you said let's not get into dehybridization, but why don't we get into the deep dive now? Because I see that time is passing, and talk about cherry tomatoes.
Oh boy. Okay, so I did have to dehybridize.
We'll jump in deep end here.
Yeah, let's go deep. So in 1992, a very long time ago, I was growing a lot of tomatoes. I'd been growing tomatoes for a long time on a non-commercial, a very small commercial scale. I did not like what I was seeing for splitting in the rain or splitting after rains, nor for quitting at the end of August. I did not like seeing that in certain cherry tomato lines. So I took the two best for flavor. One was gold, one was red. They were the most prolific. I'm not going to name their names, but they were hybrids. And I crossed those separately, two separate crossing incidents to develop a red line and a gold cherry tomato line, two separate crosses with open pollinated, vigorous cherry tomatoes of the right color that would produce until first frost. Okay, so I'm taking a hybrid red tomato and I'm crossing it with a open pollinated red tomato with different attributes, different characteristics. They both had very good flavor, if not outstanding flavor. And after that, I'm selecting generation after generation after generation, year after year after year, for not splitting in the rain, for great flavor, for high vigor, high yield, tolerance to extreme weather. Those are the criticals. And then, of course, tolerance to the really big diseases of tomatoes in our region. The disease tolerances came after we bought the farm. That's where I really had to focus a lot on disease. But I already had flavor, vigor, low splitting rates after rains, high yields. Already had that.
When did you start the project? How many years was this over?
Started in 1992 and is still ongoing. My best worker and I, over the last 7 days, have been the first workers in the cherry tomato rows. So you never save seed after a harvest of fruit. But the genetic work happens before the rest of the crew has access to those rows. And the people who live this, the farmer and their best worker, in this case, her name is Julia, we're the only people saving seed of those. I have a different worker who saves watermelon seed because he's a master of watermelon. Or not save seed, but he marks the breeders. So she and I will go through, and the target that day is, say, Mark's Amber, another one of our cherry tomatoes, or in my case, gold turtle egg. And our goal is to get the best fruits from the best plants, and those are saved separately from the market fruits, the stuff we're going to sell. And to be the best fruits from the best plants, you cannot be within 10 feet of a weak plant or of an off-type plant.
And is that for cross-pollination?
That's for cross-pollination. So I'd love it if I had hundreds of acres and a big budget and someone to pay me to do this work, but I don't. So I have to manage with still being a production farm that has to pay. We have to pay our way, and I have to pay our workers and pay everything else we have to pay for by sales. And therefore, I can't have a massive, beautiful breeding farm that is where I separate the varieties by, let's say, 500 yards. We have that much land, but we don't have that much labor. So we've done that in the past. We've certainly segregated crops by hundreds and hundreds of yards. But this year and most years, we're just doing a recurrent mass selection. So our gold star mustard, it breeds true, but we're really paying attention to pollination distance and how far pollen can travel. And we're planting in May, we're planting gold star in blocks, not single rows surrounded by rows of other things. They're planted in blocks. And that means in the middle of your block of gold star, you can choose the best individuals as mother plants and hope that pollen from, say, Cherokee Purple hasn't gotten to them. And it's been working. Bees are extremely efficient. Bees want to go flower to flower. So when they don't hop 30 feet to go to another flower unless there's insufficient nectar where they are. They'll just keep hitting flowers nearby. And thank God for that. It's not like a wind pollinated crop like corn or wheat or cannabis. Bees are pretty efficient workers. Okay, I think I explained it. Did I?
Yeah. And how many weeks will you select for seed for?
Oh boy. With brassicas, it's a one-time event because you're harvesting when the saliques are ripe, after they've flowered in the spring, after they've gone through winter. And when the seeds are ripe, you better get them because otherwise the songbirds will. And that's happened to us.
Yeah. I was thinking more on the tomatoes.
Tomatoes are easy. Tomatoes are great. You do an early harvest for seed, a mid-season vigor harvest, and you do a late season harvest for tolerance to late season adverse weather, namely cool nights, cool days, excess rain in October, and certainly September hurricanes. After a hurricane, we could sell every tomato we got for a lot of money. But instead, after a hurricane, I go through, or my best worker goes through, and we choose the best plants that haven't been ruined with the best fruits after horrible hurricane winds and rain. That's critical.
The seed from these 3 different harvest events, are they bulked together?
They're bulked because I'm assuming that in recurrent mass selection that you're going to get the aggregated genes of all the individuals contributing the next year and the next year and the next year to more survivability. I'm not keeping them separate like I do some of the greenhouse gene lines versus the open field gene lines. I'm not separating them out. I'm bulking early season for early vigor and early yield. Early yield matters because that's where you get the most money. Mid-season for vigor and high productivity, high yield, and late season for survivability.
I'd love to taste some of these tomatoes sometime. I'll have to go by in the summer.
You would be very welcome. You'd be very welcome. And you've done great work educating beginning farmers and also older farmers like me.
Well, thanks. Is there anything you want to tell us more about tomatoes or cherry tomatoes before we pivot into the wrap-up questions?
Yes. We do select for tolerances to tobacco mosaic virus, septoria, and buckeye blight. And that's usually done by destroying the plants that have those diseases. So they're ripped out and dumped to the chickens. And when we sow our tomatoes in flats, and they eventually go into a heated germination room with lights, we intentionally kill the 15% smallest seedlings. So we're selecting for vigor even at the seedling stage. So that selection is pretty critical. Another thing that we've been able to do is test these varieties, really push them. One year, years and years ago, with 3 of my best gene lines, cherry tomato gene lines, 2 of which we still propagate every year, we were really ahead of schedule we got tomatoes ready for transplanting in late March, ungodly early. I said, well, we're ahead of everything. We're making money. Let's do an outside planting and see what happens. We did 500 grow feet of each of my Gold Star tomato and Red Star tomato, and of Tessa's current tomato, which has since been parked in our seed archive. We did other gene lines as well because we had too many seedlings and it was warm. It didn't stay warm. It got cold. We eventually had a good hard frost, a killing frost by most tomato standards. We had 40% mortality, but 60% of Red Star and Gold Star survived. And not just survived, but produced tomatoes about a month ahead of all the other regions, all the other farmers in the region. So those were that was an extremely valuable test. What I'm trying to say is here, push your gene lines, push them, really see what they can do, because it's amazing what they can do. I'm not saying that's going to work with everything. You're going to have failures, and failures cost you money, but it's always good to push a little bit.
If there's somebody who's listening to this and is so excited about these tomatoes you're talking about, is there somewhere that they can get these seeds, or are they just on your farm?
They're just on our farm at our farmer's market. The problem with stealing our seeds from seeds you buy, stealing is a strong term, but I use it aware of intellectual property rights. If you were to grow them out, you'd be dehybridizing, because we say for the seeds that we save for propagation the following year are ones that have not had the opportunity or have had much lower probability of crossing with the other gene lines we grow. We grow 12 different gene lines of tomatoes at a minimum. So there's going to be cross-pollination. But if somebody wants to grow them, they could grow them from a landrace into something that was more true to type. If somebody were to take, the smartest people would take our arugula, and they would, purchased from Fedco, and they would cross it with their favorite arugula. And they would develop their own landrace for their own region, starting out with their favorite arugula for flavor or whatever their parameters were, and our arugula for insanely good survivability and vigor. And that would be a new landrace, and they would have done some breeding work, and they'd get their hands wet, doing good work.
So I'll pivot into the wrap-up questions at this point. Does that sound good?
Totally. Whatever you want to do, buddy.
So what would you tell your younger seed-growing self?
Wow. Oh, boy. I would tell my younger seed-growing self, it's going to be a lot of work, man. And a lot of work. And by the way, when you sense low seed availability of a given variety, you better start saving seed of it, or you won't have it. So eggplant at the start of COVID, commercial eggplant seed, and the incredibly good cucumber variety originally from India called Puna Kira. Some years it isn't available. So saving seed of Puna Kira is a really useful thing to do. Seed availabilities, they weren't as good as they were in 2018 or 1998. Seed availabilities are more questionable now. So save seed of varieties that you really value, that are open pollinated, that you may not be able to get next year. That's what I tell my younger self.
And what would you say to market growers to inspire them to start growing seed?
Choose your best variety that you're pissed at for the seed companies for sending you junk. If you've had low germ, the seed company does not deserve your time or money. Okra, great example. We had very low germination in spite of priming it, in spite of I've been growing okra for 40 years. 35 years. We bought seed normally because it's easy to buy. This year, I'm like, no, this is BS. We grow Clemson spineless, originally developed at Clemson for the Carolinas, great variety, highly vigorous in our region. We're going to start saving seed of it because I don't like low germination. I pay too much money for my seed. I want high germination. And when you save your own seed, you get much higher germination if you properly manage it, properly handle it post-harvest. Get much higher vigorous germination, beautiful germ. So that's what I tell the market growers. Whatever seed company you're pissed at for selling you junk, try to find a similar variety that's not a hybrid and start managing it yourself. Choose one variety to start.
Is there something that I should have asked you?
Well, we've covered a lot of stuff. I think in terms of climate change, this weather extremes are big, and the severity of what we're seeing is big. So unfortunately, tolerance to high wind has become something we have to pay attention to. Tolerance to shifts over a 48 or 72-hour period of temperature are something we really need to pay attention to hugely. I know they've always occurred historically, but the swings are happening more frequently, and plants have to adapt to that. They're stuck in one place once those roots go down. So climate change presents a lot of problems. One of the big problems, besides the weather that we see, is there's more generation of pathogens, bacteria, fungi, viruses. There's more generations per year, and those pathogens evolve faster than our crops do. So the pathogens are on the track to winning. I would bet on the pathogens winning. You really need to pay attention to pathogens and select for tolerance to pathogens, because the pathogens are going to kick our ass otherwise. And that's what we do on our farm.
We did not get into climate change as much as maybe we should have. Is there anything else you want to talk about in terms of, I don't know, I guess either adaptive breeding in function of climate change?
Yeah, if you welcome mortality and you make sure that the ones who survive the bad incidents, whether it's septoria outbreak or powdery mildew killing most of your curcubits, embrace mortality, because it's going to happen. And the survivors don't sell those fruits. You can sell those fruit. You can sell other fruits eventually, but when you save seed after really bad incidents, you're really hedging your bets for the future. A great example with our cherry tomatoes was we had Hurricane Irene followed by Tropical Storm Lee a number of years ago. It happened August 27th through September 1. 22 inches of rain.
Oh, my Lord.
That's a lot of rain in 5 days. The market tanked. The crops across our region were totally destroyed. Tomato crops were totally destroyed. Those two cherry tomato gene lines, Gold Star and Red Star, over 60% still produced flowers and fruit thereafter without disease. We didn't sell the first harvest and the second harvest and third harvest of those seed. We saved those seed. Even though I could have gotten so much money for them. Screw that. I want the best seed for next year. So when bad things happen, realize that you've just witnessed a genetic incident. You've witnessed selection at work. And that selection at work is going to really save you in the long haul. Take advantage of it.
Those are opportunities.
They are. And you're going to make money. If you're a decent farmer, you're going to make money or you're not going to make money, depending on the year. And I can say that honestly, with full knowledge. Some years you don't make money. Some years you scrap and scramble and do all that, but some years you do make money, and you're going to make money or not. If selling two extra pints of cherry tomatoes is really going to make the difference, I don't think so. Whereas we only have to save of the best mother plants, the best vigor, the best everything. 4 pints of cherry tomatoes de-seeded is going to give us thousands of seeds. 5 watermelon from your best watermelon plants is going to give you over 1,000 seed. I know I de-seed our own watermelon for seed saving. So eggplant even more prolific. So you're not really going to make a lot of money by sales. Don't let your harvesting crew go through that field before you do after a bad event. You go through, or your best worker goes through. She and you, or he and you, whoever, they and you are gonna get the best fruit from the best plants, the best survivors. And that's the critical thing with recurrent mass selection. And you don't have to hybridize. You don't have to use a paintbrush to cross-pollinate. You can let the bees and the bumbleid flies and everything else that pollinate, you can let them do it if you properly manage spacings. Cool?
Yeah. Now, how can people find out more about what you're doing?
What I'm doing now hasn't been covered. Again, my main publisher was Growing for Market. So getting the digital archival version of Growing for Market is a huge asset to any beginning farmer. Because if you get the digital archival version, which is cheaper than the print version, or at least it's very affordable, and a couple thumb drives, you just download you scan for the kind of articles that you want, you download those onto your thumb drive, old articles. People have been breeding crops for thousands of years. The techniques haven't really changed for most crops. We're forgetting genetic modification with exogenous organisms. Forgetting that. The techniques are really the same. So get the digital archival version, and whether you want to learn about greenhouse tulips, or whether you want to learn about winter cropping, or whether you want to learn about breeding, get the digital archival version of Growing for Market. And the publisher does not pay me to say this. Get that and start reading those articles, because most of the techniques really don't change. They really don't. I've been in the business a long time. There's a lot of old wine packaged in new bottles. And by the way, hydroponic and soilless is not carbon neutral. It's carbon intensive. So beware of your carbon footprint. Be aware of it. We are all stewards. And when we go to too much technology, it can be remarkably carbon intensive. It's like private jets taking us to Timbuktu or Sri Lanka. It's carbon intensive, and be honest about that.
Well, I guess on those words.
Yeah, on those words. See, I could really end with a punch. I don't really pull punches.
Well, thanks, Brett, so much for coming in and talking about this. I feel like we've just scratched the surface.
You can go deeper any other time. I love this thing.
I hope you have a great continuation of your season.
Dan, thank you so much, and I look forward to speaking with you in the future. It's been great.
All the best.
Okay, take care, my friend. Be good.
And that's episode 81 of the Seed Farmer Podcast. A big thanks to Brett for being on the podcast, and also for writing all those articles in Growing for Market that inspired me as I got on my seed journey. You've already heard me talk about them in the conversation, but they really had an impact on me, and they really inspired me to want to do better seed work. Thank you to Cepheus Edelton for the theme music. You can hear more of their music at cepheusedelton.com. Thank you to Molly Breezeboer for editing this episode, and thank you so much for joining me in these conversations with seed farmers. You can find more seed growing resources on my blog at seedgrowers.farm. While you're there, you can subscribe to my newsletter full of seed growing, crop planning, and farm spreadsheets. You can also find out where to order a copy of my book, The Seed Farmer, a complete guide to growing, using, and selling your own seed. And you can support the podcast at spreadsheet.farm/supportpodcast, or follow the link in the show notes. If you haven't already subscribed to this podcast, now's the time. You wouldn't want to miss the next episode. Until then, happy farming.